Nef and Ma'at. That means we're offering you truth. We want to welcome you to Sexual Alchemy, to our webinar series. Today, this is an extension of a series. If it's your first time here, Sexual Alchemy is a retreat that Leyanne and I are hosting in Cabo Verde. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. If it's your first time here, there's a link in the description to all of the other streams that we've done leading up to this one, which is actually the closing webinar as we complete this beautiful series that we have been sharing with you. So we'll begin with some brief introductions for anyone that's here that hasn't been here before. For those who are returning, welcome back. Shout out to everybody who's here with us live and those who have been tuning in consistently to our series. We feel you. We are so deeply thankful that you found value in what we're sharing, and welcome you back.
Yeah. Welcome, family. Welcome to the closing. This is going to be another really potent transmission, message, info, and insight from Nef and I on one of a really important chakra. We've been moving through all of them, starting at the crown, and now we are at the root, the root of it all. So we have a really incredible time. Again, if you're logging on today, this is a dose of the medicine of the Sexual Alchemy Retreat. So we're giving you a little dose of the full medicine that you'll really be able to experience if you join us live in Cabo Verde on February 28th to March 7th during the Carnival ritual festival in Cabo Verde, Africa, for a 7-day transformational retreat. So for those who don't know me, my name is Leyanne Oliveira. I am a medicine woman, a yogini, a mother, a sister, a criolla, a ceremonialist, a womb keeper, someone that is just passionate about supporting people through their ascension, to harness their power, to live out their full, authentic spirit in this lifetime during the revolution that we are experiencing.
Ashe, and I'm Nef, Aust NeferKa. I am the mother of Tehuti Ma'at, which is a revolutionary instrument that functions as a grassroots cooperative focused on building healing institutions for the purpose of the resurrection of people of African ascent and the success of this continued revolutionary process that we're really continuing, that our ancestors that struggled and sacrificed so much for us to arrive at this moment where we're finally in our time. That's what sexual alchemy to me represents. It represents the reclamation and the return of our legacy as the first farmers and gardeners and beings stewards of this earth, right? Our legacy through sexual alchemy is about the creative force of this planet and the stabilizing of that energy. And today, because we're talking about stabilizing your foundation, a lot of the medicine and sexual alchemy comes from ancient Kemetic sacred science. I am a sacred wisdom keeper of ancient African science. I'm a high priestess of Kemetic science, and I'm a farmer. I'm a proud farmer. I think that is really the essence of really where most of this medicine comes from, because it's not just learned studies. It's about what I've awakened in my genetic memory through cultivating the earth and cultivating the land. So I am really excited about us getting started today. So as we said, today is all about stabilizing your foundation. We're going into the root energy center. It is the base of the 7 main energy centers. So we'll go over that, because sexual alchemy as a medicine and what we're going over in the retreat is actually going to be through the entire circulatory system of our body and the different energy centers that are really beyond our physical body. But there are 7 main energy centers that most people are familiar with, and that's what we've been moving through in this series. And as Leyanne expressed, this is really about this medicine, this ceremony, and this beautiful ritual that we're cultivating in Cabo Verde from February 28th through March 7th. So if you feel called, if you are a person of African ascent, whether you're male, female, we want to invite you to come to the Sexual Alchemy Retreat. It is going to be a 7-day retreat where we're going to move through beautifully and fully support you in the process of sexual alchemy by moving into and through all of the current energies that are present with you in your body, and we're going to move through a process of really facing and alchemizing and moving through whatever density is present so that you can recognize the power that you have by being fully embodied in your power, because that's really what it's about. So what we've been sharing within the series has been a portion, really a fraction of what we're going to share in the actual sexual alchemy classes that we share at the retreat. Which is going to be a beautiful experience, right on the ocean. And Cabo Verde is such a significant space. We're going to talk about that a little bit more as we talk about stabilizing our foundation, specifically when we're talking about people of African ascent, right? There's a lot of people talking about sexual alchemy, talking about spirituality, talking about ascension, talking about all these things. And it's not necessarily rooted in our particular lineage. And I think that what we're offering is so important because of that, right? Putting things in their proper context. So we'll go deeper into that. But at this retreat, like Leyanne said, it is during the Carnival ritual. It's a beautiful community ritual that's carried out across the diaspora of Africa. No matter where you were born or where you're from, right? Recognizing that Africa is within us, right? Recognizing that Africa is the cradle of life on this planet and has spread its seed all across this planet. And this is part of our reclamation of that. So through this experience, we're going to actually celebrate. That's going to be the climax, is going to the Carnival Festival. There's 2 days of the beautiful parade that is in celebration of fertility, creativity, life, sexual energy, beauty, abundance, radiance, right? It's a very significant ritual. So as we build up for that, there's so many different experiences that we're going to have. I'll let Leyanne speak a little bit more, because we're going to really be moving a lot through the body, because it's not just about this information, right? This is not just about aggregating more information for you. This is about how can you see this in a way where you apply it and embody it.
Yeah, the reason why we say this is a dose is because the truth of it is we're giving you information through the screen. It is as much as we want to transmit all that we can, we are limited by this technology where we can give you this information and you can receive it and it can land in the body, but we can't support you through the actual processing of it. So the retreat, we have ceremonies, peace, Tony, we have ceremonies and rituals where we'll be supporting you through actually processing all that comes up by you just simply going back home, right? Returning back to the place of your ancestors, returning back to your root. We also will be taking you through excursions, which I'm excited about, including swimming with the turtles and receiving some turtle medicine. Turtles are really beautiful and have so much grace and so much courage, which I learned recently. And yeah, we'll be surrendering in the Atlantic Ocean with these beings, these live beings. We'll be in a private space, a beautiful private space, really intimate space. This retreat is very intimate, and which is done intentionally because it's Nef and I supporting you. We want to be very present and supporting you in building that trust and safety in your body, which we'll be talking more about, to help this energy rise, because it's important for us to be feeling free and expansive in our bodies for this process that wants to happen, for it to naturally unfold. We'll be doing some womb healing, somatic work, which is really going to be the place I'm going to come in with my expertise of like really helping, supporting for you to not only heal mentally, which is the place where we've collectively been moving through, is like learning about healing, starting to undo it in our minds, but I will be supporting, and Nef will as well, of like actually moving it through the body. And that's some of the rituals, which will include a sacred fire, so we can actually use the element of fire to support us in releasing and letting go of the things that are holding us back, that are holding our life force shackled and is hooking us from allowing our life force, our spirit to flow in our bodies and flow in our lives.
I say, yeah. And it being a holistic, immersive experience is so important, because everything matters. When we're talking about sexual alchemy, remember the alchemy is about the chemistry, right? the actual transformation, right? It's one thing to just release something and put it down, but sometimes we don't recognize when we remove something, we create a void and something else can easily fill that void, right? So it's important that we do a holistic process, right? This is definitely something that is immersive, right? It's going to be really sweet, juicy, and it's also going to be intense. And there's going to be moments where it's scary, but that's really the excitement of like it being like full-fledged transmutation of energy. And once you experience that and you're in that process and you recognize the power that you're holding within you, that's really what it's all about. So even the foods, we're making sure we're acquiring the most high frequency foods that we can. We're very intentional about the foods and where we're getting the foods locally, and also just making sure it's ethically sourced and really the optimal chemistry for fueling the body for this process. So we want to invite you, if you are interested in learning more, right, as we begin to dive into our final webinar for this series, you can always go to sexualalchemy.com to get more information. And we'll talk a little bit about this at the end. If you are here with us live, I want to shout out those who are here. Shout out to Infinite Dreams Studio and Tony, who are here with us live. If you're here with us live, you can comment. You can go ahead and leave your comments in the chat. We would love to hear from you and incorporate you into the discussion so that we can be informed by whatever it is that you need, or if you have any questions. At sexualalchemy.com, we do have a space for you to book a chemistry call so we can see if this is the right fit for you, answer any questions that you have, really support you in getting to the next stage of the process, to book your tickets to come to Cabo Verde. And finally, if you're just ready to go, you can just apply directly on the website. So without further ado, we're going to make sure that we just tune ourselves in and we're all present in this moment for the medicine that we're going to move through for today. So the way that we're going to do that, first and foremost, I want to invite you to just fully be present. If you are rummaging around doing other things, I want you to just pause, come in for a moment, right? Just take a few moments to just really be present so that you can really process what is coming through today. So I want to invite us all to just first just have some clearing breaths. And then I'm going to welcome in the sound bowl. We're actually going to bring this beautiful crystal bowl, right? Which is earth energy that we're going to be talking about today as we go into the root. And this bowl is tuned to the frequency of our root Arit, or our root chakra, our root energy center. So it's tuning us to the natural frequency that our root, right, this stabilizing, this foundational energy center is meant or designed to actually vibrate at. So in this moment, I'm going to invite you to just take a deep inhale, expanding your belly, butterflying the rib cage open, really filling the lungs, and then dropping that jaw. I just want you to release out. Just release out audibly. Don't hold back, right? Just coming in. We're going to do one more. Inhaling, really filling up that belly like a balloon, right? No shallow breaths here in the chest. We're going deep into the belly and releasing. So as I'm playing the tone, I want to invite you to continue to be present with your breath. Really feel into it. Really see if you could expand that belly more. See if you can hold more as you fill your lungs, right? And really directing that oxygen where you need it, remembering and retrieving your energy that may have been spread throughout the day, or that may be spread into what you have going on next, right? Anything that's scattering you from outside of this moment, I want you to go ahead and zip yourself up and gather your energy back as I'm playing this tone for us. Giving thanks, giving thanks, giving gratitude to this great spirit, this beautiful divine mystery that we're a part of, this great creative force, and this reminder that this tone gives us that we are safe, we are secure, we are strong, we are free. Reminding us, right, as we look at these roots on the screen, that this body is of the earth, right? So there's a natural divine frequency of this planet that has been disturbed that we're restoring, because this is a regenerative planet. It's designed to heal itself. It's designed to rebirth itself and constantly go through a process of regeneration. And we also have that within our bodies, right? Every 7 years, all of the cells in our body completely regenerate. So there's always space, there's always opportunity for more stability, for more healing, for more growth and rejuvenation of our bodies. So I want to thank you for sharing that breath and for coming and being fully present here in this moment with us as we go ahead and dive in, right? We are at the root, the red center, right? Right at the bottom of our sit bone, our tailbone, right? Right in the base of our spine. We have this beautiful, powerful energy that we're going to elaborate on today, but we've really been moving through all of the other energy centers that we covered in the series, and it's all connected. And I think it's important to recognize that we went from the top of the crown, which is that infinite space that allows us to connect and tap into what is far beyond our body. And as we worked our way down to the first eye and our vision, and learning about how we can balance our vision, coming into our throat and the expression, our ability to create, our ability to vibrate and align, right, through balancing the throat energy center. We went into the heart and we talked about this integral space, right, of integrity, of honesty and authenticity, of the truth of what our soul wants to radiate, the truth of our connection, our ability to connect with all things. And as we centered in that space, we moved into the core, into our solar plexus, into the seat of our willpower. We talked about how we can strengthen our willpower and assert ourselves from a space of truth. And then we worked our way into the sacral, and we talked about the beautiful distinction that happens here with our sexual energy and the way that it receives and it exerts energy and creates, right? And how we can stimulate and cultivate our creativity. And today we're going into the root, which is actually the finite expression. When we think of the earth, when we think of our bodies, we know none of us are going to escape death, right? And this root, this energy center, is about that space of our physicality, right? Of the finite expression of our being. So that's really where we're going to center ourselves today. We're going to remind ourselves that this is a circulatory system. It's not just top down, it's also bottom up. There are things we do in our physical reality that support and nurture us in stirring this energy and raising it so that we can connect to that infinite expression of pure potential that we can tap into. So I'm going to let our sister Leyanne elaborate a bit more about this beautiful energy center, this Arit, right? Remember, we learned that the Arit is the meruneter for chakra, which is the Sanskrit word for the energy center. And if we're talking about all of them and we're speaking, or multiple in plural, and we say chakras, we would say Aritu. So just reviewing back on that and making sure that we're exercising, using the language and the things that we're learning, right? And applying it. That's part of the embodiment, right? Because it's through our throat energy center that we're also asserting and expressing these vibrations. So
yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that, for that arriving. That was a really yummy sound. So the root chakra, I want to share some of the themes of this chakra, which will kind of lay out what we're going to be covering today. It's going to give you a landscape of what we're going to be covering, because we're going to be going into a lot of places. And today is really potent. Like, please stay tuned into this. If you're watching the replay, I'm glad that you're here, because I'm not going to say the root chakra is my favorite, because it's not. But it's one that it has a huge significance. And even though oftentimes we want to go to the third eye and we want to go to the crown, we often want to move up very quickly. the root chakra is really the foundation of that. And the unfolding to the other upper chakras will happen naturally once this specific chakra is taken care of. So oftentimes we want to move up, and the reality of it, the base of it is so important. This root chakra is connected to our security. So like we've mentioned in other previous webinar series videos that we've done, the chakras below the heart are all in connection, or all relate to our physical self. So this has to do with our physical security, how safe we feel. It's also connected to how grounded we feel to this plane, how grounded do we feel to the earth, how and if you think about embodiment, this is exactly it. It's like moving away from the mind, like how grounded do you feel on the earth? So obviously this chakra is ruled by the earth element, the land masses. This is also connected to our basic needs as human beings. So I'm talking about your air, I'm talking about your food, I'm talking about your shelter. So all of these things impact and are specifically indirectly connected to this root chakra. The root chakra, because it's the root, it's also deeply connected to ancestral memories, which is why this live is really important. If you're a melanated person, this live is really important for you to stay with and to stay grounded, and we'll be supporting you in doing that. But because it's connected to our survival instincts, there might be a body reaction to escape, to leave. And as we are stabilizing our foundation, we want to stay here. So it's connected to our ancestor memories, and also the unconscious mind, which again, when we go into the unconscious mind, our bodies have certain reactions that will bring us into survival responses. And today we do want to take you there to those unconscious place, and we want you to stay connected and rooted as you're stabilizing your foundation. And one of the simplest ways you could do that throughout our time today is to breathe. Please, as we're going through the root chakra, ensure that you are breathing. If you're watching, if you're feeling tight, if you're feeling tense, if you're feeling anything as we're bringing things up, remember one of the most powerful tools we have is our breath. So just ensuring you're and that in itself is bringing life force to support us in moving the things that we're going to bring up out of the body. This chakra is located at the base of the spine. And the way that you could see this physically is it's right above the perineum, and the perineum is the space between the genital and the anus. So if you think about that place down below, in your physical body, it's a slightly bit up and where the spine ends. So it's internal, and located at the bottom of the spine. This is connected to belonging, which is also really important to mention. And then we'll go into the ways that we will know if this chakra is balanced and unbalanced as we process and go through this.
Yeah, I love that you specifically use the word our security, right? Because a lot of people are oriented into this energy center through the word survival. So that's something that I really want to get into. I do want to share with everyone that the beautiful stone on the screen, per your request, Leyanne, is a red agate. Just making sure that we're honoring the earth energy and recognizing the mineral kingdom as a really beautiful, powerful expression of stability on this planet. When we think about the firmness of the minerals, when we think about the everlasting minerals like gold, right? When we think about the stability that this earth provides us with, that we oftentimes take for granted, I really want to lift that beautiful stabilizing energy that these crystals, these stones, these beautiful expressions on the planet provide for us. And then there's also a softness as well, because as you were talking about the earth and our basic needs, we have to remember our water, right? Most of this planet is water. Most of our body is water as an expression of that same mirroring. And when I think about the water meeting the earth, I think about one of my favorite places on this planet, no matter where I go, it's the beach, you know, and how the water works through the solid rock and turns it into sand. Like, it's just such an amazing, beautiful expression of alchemy on this planet that I also want to lift and honor as really the true educator, right? Of what it is that we're sharing, right? So as we go into survival and we think about our bodies, right? Why do people associate the root energy with survival, and how can we look at that, particularly as African people, as you said, because we're talking about, for people of African descent, there's a direct intent on the work and the mission that we're doing. When we did the first launch for Sexual Alchemy, we talked about accessing Black power through sexual healing, because we're very clear about a need and a very direct space that needs to be spoken to, right? That we deserve attention, you know, specifically for the pain that we've been carrying, for the lesson that we've been expressing through our experience as African people on this planet, that we chose to come here to serve, right? As expressions of this universal multiverse of experience that we can't even comprehend, right? There's something that we came here to express and to live through, and that experience is something we've been living through. And I don't think that us looking at it through the lens of survival is really liberated. So I love that you said security, and I want us to think about how we associate security with survival and how nature perceives that. So one of the primary ways that we've been colonized, right, that our minds, our spirits have been colonized, not only through religion and these beliefs and dogmas that have blocked us and literally created fear around basic primal instincts and energies that we have, whether that's the suppression of our sexual energy, whether that's the fear around like the serpent energy and the feminine being villainized and demonized in different religions. There's so many different ways that the colonizers, right, those who literally entered into the lands of our ancestors and made them gather all of their traditional beliefs and practices and burn them quite literally, and force them, right? When we think about the age where we had the Crusades and different religions, which have literally been the handmaidens of conquerors, as Dr. John Hendrik Clark would say. All religions have been the handmaidens of conquerors, because the power that is held in our spiritual nature and the nature of religion to then come and impose upon it some type of container to contain that energy that is designed to be free, right? And it is something that we have to be responsible with, because with freedom comes responsibility. But that wasn't the only thing that was colonized, right? Our minds, our ideas, our belief systems have been colonized, the way that we perceive our existence on the planet. And one of the ways at a very early age, and I believe in most of the planet, people have been indoctrinated into a belief around what is human development. And that doesn't mean that, obviously, with sexual alchemy, we're talking about science, right? This isn't against science itself as a practice of observation, of studying nature and patterns. It's about a institution that has been placed upon it to direct us in a particular way. Science is inherently about curiosity. You have to observe and surrender to the nature that you're observing. But science, in the way that we've been experiencing it through the Western lens, right? And remember, when we talk about the West, we talked in previous sessions about the duat, about the underworld, about the West, where the sun goes to rest. It's recognized as the realm of the darkness, right? And when we think about what the Western perceptions of most of the beliefs that we have been sharing have been coming from the East, right? We're talking about a space of illumination. So when I think about the indoctrination about how we perceive the world in science, as like science being something that now, instead of it observing, it's like imposing, like it's about creating and making things do what you want it to do instead of observing and learning from it in a lot of ways. I think about The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin and the theory of evolution and this idea of survival of the fittest that we have been indoctrinated to believe. So when you look at the actual book of Charles Darwin that most of us are taught in schools, you have The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. What most people don't know is that the full title of this book is The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. So that whole theory, as innocently as we may think, oh, it's just about survival of the fittest, it's just about adapting, it's about the ones who are strongest built to survive are going to adapt. This was a justification for colonialism. This was a justification for the actual invasion and extraction and abuse that was then perpetuated on this foundation. Right. So I think it's very important for us to question, like, what is the struggle for life? Is that even our belief when it comes to our security on the planet? Or does our belief more so come from the securing of the earth? Right. The stabilizing of the earth is what gives us security, because when there's abundance, then we're stabilized. When there's scarcity and when there's struggle, when there's lack, that's when we have violence, when we have, people at odds against each other, fighting each other. So I think it's a very different orientation. So I just want to remind us to go back to some of the things that we talked about in the very beginning when we first started going over sexual alchemy. And we talked about the two cradle theory, and we talked about the development in the ice, right? In the development where there was a lack of food, where you had to kill to eat, and the nature that was cultivated in that, and the culture that was cultivated in that, and then the culture that was cultivated in the abundance of the tropics, where you had warmth, right? And literally our physical adaptations changed within that. When we're talking about the root energy center, we're talking about the physical nature of the body. So when we think about things like carbon, like the foundation of what they call melanin, right? When we think about our ability to process the sun and the photons, and the fact that there are Africans who have deeper compounds of carbon so that they can process because of the more exposure to the sun, that is also expressed in the physical body, and that is expressed in multiple dimensions. So I just wanted to express that. I apologize. Just to give a disclaimer before we go into the next slide. It is an image that many people have seen, but it is one that can
activate.
Yeah, it can activate, and it can really create discomfort and a lot of pain when we face like the reality of what the experience of our ancestors were. But there's a very specific reason why we're showing this image. So just, a trigger warning if it does bother you, this image. But I think it's very important for us to face, and I'm going to let Leyanne actually speak on why this is so important for us as African people.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about, again, remember to breathe, right? Because when we're talking about alchemy, this is about embodying our power, and we cannot embody our power. You can't do any real healing if you are not facing your past, if you're not seeing the thing, if you're not able to actually process, digest, right? Which is why we're bringing this image up, because when I think about my brothers and sisters, right? When I think about us, people of color, indigenous folks, Black people, I think about one of the most important fundamental chakras that we really need to be in community around is the root chakra. Like I said, even though oftentimes people want to move up, this chakra is the stabilizing of all the chakras. If this chakra specifically is off, it's like someone walking, it's like a, how do I describe it? I'm thinking of an analogy of like, it's like walking upside down. It just doesn't make sense if it's not rooted. Now, when the root chakra, because it's so connected to our physical bodies, the harm that is done to our physical bodies really tarnishes the energy. Because when we're thinking about these energy centers, they're vortexes, and they're sending the energy out. Some are, sometimes it's bringing the energy in. And when you experience this form of barbarism and abuse at the physical level, you hold that in your body. And now, if we're talking about the root chakra being the foundation, the stabilizer, that all of our chakras are on, then you can imagine the importance for us in our history to be looking to be focusing on the root chakra and understanding it past what is mainstream, right? Personalizing it to us, understanding our past in the way that I think Nef could talk to it better than I can, of all the brutality, all the forms of brutality that we have experienced at a physical level. When I say we, it's because the ancestors are within us, and anything that they didn't get a chance to face is still existing in us at a cellular level. And the root chakra, when it is not in balance, we're going to go deeper into that, what happens when it's not in balance, but just a snippet of it. You cannot grow unless you feel safe and secure. Okay, so if you're not feeling safe and secure, which is the themes that the root chakra is in charge of, no matter how much your mind's eye is bringing you into these beautiful visions that you want to bring, it's literally impossible to bring it into the physical realm, right? You can see it, you can perceive it, you can have dreams around it, but if the root chakra, that security, that stability has been, more than tampered with, the word that comes to me is tampered, but it's like it's been violated. There's some real work that we need to do there. There's some real things that we need to face. And as you can see from this picture of our brother here, can you imagine the pain? Can you imagine, the contraction, the tension, the restraint of his life force from just the contraction of the pain of this constant abuse?
Yeah. And it's really important for us to think about this in the context of how we even perceive what it is that makes us feel safe, right? Because an illusion of safety is not true security, right? And we have so many scholars, like I want to put on the screen, because you mentioned this barbarism, right? One of the things about Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop, like if we're going to look at anthropology, which is inherently biased, I want to say that. But if we're going to look at anthropology, we can look at it through an African-centered lens. And that's what Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop allows us to do. When he presented the two cradle theory, that was critical, because up until then, you had Charles Darwin talking about, okay, here you have apes and then Black people, and then, yep, we're at the top of the food chain for the Anglo-Saxons. Right? Like when you think about that and that perception of a linear growth, right? Like, oh, things just go up from here. It was a distraction from what another one of our great beloved ancestors spoke on, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. She wrote the book called The Isis Papers. And Dr. Frances Cress Welsing said that every single African person is mentally ill if they are not facing the reality or putting in any way any of their energy towards the change of our current situation on the planet, right? So the presumption of the presumption that white is supreme or above, or like a lot of the ways that we've talked about a lot, especially in when we talked about like Cape Verdean culture and like this pedestalization of Portuguese culture because that was the colonizer. Or when you think about any other tradition, if you could even go to Nigeria, where have some of the proudest Africans, but it's still coming from a place of pedestalizing the British and British culture, right? English culture. So I think it's very significant for us to recognize that as Africans on the planet, we have a lot more work to do around the liberation of our minds, our bodies, and our spirit. And that is essential for our health and for our security and for our stability. So when we're working towards that, that is an expression of health, of security, of stabilizing, because we're facing the truth of the reality that we're in. We have a lot of people that exist in a delusional reality and not acknowledging the circumstances and situation that we're in, because we don't want to take responsibility and authority and control. That's what you need to embody your power. If you're not going to take accountability for protecting your people, right? For protecting, because think about it, this is about primal nature. When we come back down to the earth, the root is about our animal nature. So then our perception of our growth and how we develop on the planet has been colonized. We think about it in a linear context. We think about everything very mental, very logical, because that's what's been imposed upon us. When our ancient traditions, and when you look at any indigenous tradition, it was rooted in holistic paradigms where you're dealing with all parts of the being, primarily the heart, right? And when you said that we are our ancestors, we can't ignore what happened, whether you're a perpetrator, whether your ancestors were the ones selling out other Africans, or whether your ancestors were the ones suffering at the hands of those people. It doesn't matter, because it's in the blood. Trauma is stored in the blood. And remember what we talked about when we went into the heart, Arit. When we talked about the heart, we talked about that iron in the blood. And we talked about what's circulating in the blood. And there's a process that we can activate of both taking in new information, right? Healing, and releasing the old information. But if we don't face the truth and the reality of what's there, how can we cleanse it out of our blood and out of our system? We have to process it. And a lot of that is through physical change. That's what the root energy center represents. So I think that one of the things that our sister was talking about is like how the body contracts when that type of force and brutality is expressed, when you're actually in danger, where every day you wake up and you don't know if someone's going to come in and rape you, right? We're talking about sexual alchemy. So we've talked a lot about sexual trauma, and it's not just through the enslavement, but think about the ways that we have perpetuated that. In the first series, beginning of the series, we talked about how we've recycled a lot of the things, like, for example, the inbreeding, when there were plantations that were literally just there for breeding. And you had people forced to literally procreate with their offspring, right? You might have a mother who was forced to have sex with her son so that she could get pregnant and have another person for them to enslave. So that has created a pattern of incest that we also recycle. So a lot of the sexual trauma that's happened, when we think about the strong African men that were brought onto the decks of the ships and raped in front of all the people, intentionally to show a power dynamic. We talked about how that's still happening. We talk about that happening metaphorically. So all of those things are specifically to trigger a trauma response in us, even when it's done now in the ways that it's done more so psychologically, where you see a strong Black man, for example, like be taken down. Those things do something to us because they trigger something in our collective memory. They trigger us remembering someone strong who spoke up for us, like a Malcolm X being assassinated. They trigger these trauma responses, and that is essential to some of the things that we've already been touching on as we've been talking about the JED. We've been talking about the spinal column. We've been talking about the central nervous system and how the brain functions and provides us with the mechanisms that we need for our security. Because what protects us is when our parasympathetic nervous system is activated and we know we need to either run, right, away from danger, right? There's a threat. So there's some type of threat that we identify, and we need that in order to preserve ourselves. So instead of looking at it from a lens of just survival, just for the means of survival, we're also thinking about how do we protect ourselves. So a lot of the responses that we've adopted and the ways that we've contracted ourselves were for survival. And now, because we're not physically in the same circumstances, yes, we can argue that mentally we're still enslaved in several different dimensions. I don't deny that, but we're not in the same physical position that our ancestors were in. So a lot of the unlearning from our nervous system and releasing from our nervous system has to be to release, like, we're not in the same dynamic And because our body's still holding on to that, we're recycling the trauma in different ways because our minds and our bodies have now adjusted to that trauma, where it can be something that we make a regular response. I don't think it's something that I would consider normal in the sense that sometimes we say, oh, we normalize something, but just because we make something regular doesn't mean that it's the normal state of our body. So I wanted us to talk a little bit about the balance between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. Remember, we did an exercise earlier in the series where we did the alternating nostril breathing. I think we did that for the crown energy center when we talked about embodying your power. So remember that was all about this. We were balancing the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system through the breath.
Yeah. One of the things that I learned through yoga is, most of the yogis really spent, they were seekers, right? They were looking for answers. They gave their life to all the things that, that I've learned, that I partake, or even some of this information that we're sharing. It's like, it's from seekers, people that have given their life, right, to explore the inner realms. One of the things that they noticed about the external realms is that most human beings will live and die and remain in the root chakra. So, if you're on this live, then I'm sure that you have moved up your chakras, and that's why you're even pulled towards this live to continue to move it. But most of the people around you, you've noticed that they have this very physical attachment to this reality, right? It's like they're only going to live this one life. After this, there's only hell and heaven. It's like they don't see the continuous nature of their spirit, the continuous nature of reality, their energetic nature that you can only arrive to as you move up your energy centers. Now, when speaking specifically to the revolution that we are in right now, one of the imbalances of the sacral chakra, right? One of the ways for me to just literally grab your sacral chakra and just like pull it right from underneath you, which will destabilize you, is through what Nef was saying of bringing up these ancestral memories up in you, right? If I am someone that is into these arts, right, which we know that the opposition or whoever the beings are that are in domination that actually feed off our energy, if they understand the human,
the parasites, we talked about that
too. Parasites, that's a beautiful way of lifting them up and showing them the parasites. The way that they feed off us is through fear, right? It's targeting these specific memories that they know will bring you into survival mode. And most beings are operating, the ones that I'm saying will live from their roots and stay there until to the point of death and transition. It's because of living in survival mode. This is why addressing this root chakra is so important, right? Because when you're not feeling safe, when you're not secure, you can't grow. You can't go up to the chakras. You can't move up in consciousness. Now, the survival mode that most people are in is evident. And again, once I trigger you into fear, once I bring something up that is ancestral, right? So literally by race, I know exactly how to, it's easy for me to bring you into the state of survival, because if you understand and know history, right, it could be easy. Now, the survival modes are, if you've never heard of them, I would love to go through them, which are essentially trauma responses. The first one being fight, right? It's people that are, and this we're going a little bit into like the imbalances, but if someone has an overactive root chakra, they are often aggressive. So with the fight, right, if you're in survival mode, you're someone that is constantly in the fight. You don't feel safe. The bottom line is that you're not feeling safe in your body. And so you are constantly ready to attack, to fight whatever is out to kill you, right? Again, the root chakra being about survival, wanting to preserve life and for life to continue, for your life to continue, right? This animalistic instinct of I want to live. like anything that is alive, from a small insect, if you go after it to kill it, you will see it run away. It has a desire, an instinct to want to live. So one of the first trauma responses that you will see, and you if you haven't seen it in you've probably seen it in others around you, is this constant pull or trigger. When they get triggered, activated, right? When we showed you the picture, where like it's going to activate you. So once you get activated, you go into the survival mode, the trauma response, a fight. Another, and these are good to like be aware of in noticing your body. Like, am I in a trauma response right now? Am I in a survival response? Because that's when the higher intelligence comes in. Because if you're in one of those responses, that means you're in the sympathetic nervous system. You have officially turned on your flight or fight. So there is a certain chemistry that you have turned your body into. So your brain starts secreting certain hormones specifically because it feels like there is a lion, a tiger, there is a threat in front of you. So, and when your sympathetic nervous system is on and you're in the survival mode, you are literally turning parts of your brain off. So the people that are in this on the cycle of just living on survival mode all the time, not feeling safe with an imbalanced root chakra, you are not making decisions from your spirit.
Yeah.
Because you have literally, your body has shut off your access to making decisions. And if you're thinking about that as a mother, if you're a mother, a father, someone that has someone, or, you know, even a regular human being, but I'm thinking about the beings that have the responsibility of little ones. Like you're not even being present enough to honor that responsibility that God has given you to take after a being that can't take care of themselves at the stage of development that they're in. So if you're in some of these places that it turns off is like the prefrontal cortex, which is seen as your CEO.
And we talked about that being the first eye, right? So it shuts down your vision, your ability to see beyond that moment, because that's part of the protection, right? Because now the body knows, like, you fuck a vision right now. Excuse my language. It's just like, we need to get away from this lion that's about to kill you. That's how the instinct was created, to protect you, right? But it's interesting because even what you said about the disconnect from spirit, like one of the primary things, like if you look on the right-hand side, there's the graphic actually says some of the things. So one thing that stood out to me was how it constricts the airways. So if it constricts the airways, that means you're taking in less air, right? When you think about breath, that's the essence of spirit, right? So if you're taking less breath, it constricts that, because now you need to drop into your ego. You need to really be clear about what it's going to take to navigate the physical reality that you're in to protect your body, right? Yeah. And then before you moved on to the next response, what I wanted to say to that is, it makes me think about how we have so much violence amongst each other. And like, instead of us addressing that, or like the fight being directed appropriately to like the oppositional force that's imposing these circumstances and situations on us, because we don't have full clarity around exactly how we got here and exactly what the situation we're in is, you know, like there's a lot of programming around like perceiving our reality in a particular way. So if we were to see the truth of that reality, we could direct our fight appropriately. But because it's not, we implode and we literally express that violence amongst each other, where we're killing ourselves and each other. And I mean that literally. I mean, there are people who are literally taking their own lives intentionally at the highest levels that we've ever seen right now. And we also have people who are literally killing each other. And we also have a reality where we're killing ourselves subconsciously by the ways that we're poisoning ourselves with the unhealthy foods, with the ways that we're just pacifying or just trying to escape the reality that we're in. So those are all expressions as well of the root imbalance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when your sympathetic nervous system is on, and what happens is, because you're in a trauma response of like surviving, one of the things that it does is your body moves energy to your hands and your feet, right? So you can fight or you can run away, and it pulls energy from your digestive system, and which makes sense why so many people have digestive issues. You might have digestive issues because your body literally is not able to turn on the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest. It's the heal, which we'll talk about. But let me finish off with the sympathetic first. So it's fight or flight or flight. So another one is flight, which is you might not want to be, anytime if there's something that you actually need to say, you're not saying it. It's like a shutdown. So the system shuts down and it runs away. So you might not be saying the things that you need to say. You might be feeling like your throat is constricted, not knowing that that's a trauma response. That the way that you have this pattern of running away from problems, constantly not facing what you need to face, is because you're in a trauma response. And one of the ways to, and again, this is only a portion of your nervous system. This is a portion of it. And there's another portion that you can do through different practices to turn on, which is the parasympathetic. So one of the parts of healing, and the reason why the somatic work is so important, is while we're in Cabo Verde, we're going to be really focusing on having your parasympathetic on, which again is your rest, digest, and heal. The body is a self-healing vehicle. It wants to heal. It is constantly working towards healing. It wants to release these traumas. It wants to be balanced. It wants to have a balanced root chakra. So what happens when you turn on the parasympathetic, you are just automatically, naturally, through the process, the beautiful cosmic intelligence, releasing these traumas and healing. But again, we are on this constant cycle of being, which is an imbalance of the root chakra, being anxious, right? Which is a hot topic. Like so many people, I'm anxious, not getting to the root of saying like, the knowing of, you actually just have your sympathetic nervous system on. So we need to turn on your parasympathetic so you can actually not feel that way, because it's not normal. It's not a norm, or escaping it, like Nef was saying, with pharmaceuticals, which is a whole different thing for another time. So again, you have access to your parasympathetic and your sympathetic, right? And it's a choice. And I'm not saying that the sympathetic is bad, right? Because we need that, right? If we're talking about revolution, we're talking about war. It's like, yeah, I need to horn in. I need to have my energy to my hand. I do need to be able to be hyper vigilant around my surrounding when there is danger and threat. But what happens to the body when there isn't? Mm-hmm. Our bodies are not, the reason why we have both is because we're supposed to be turning it on and off. There's supposed to be a shift, and we are actually, and our ancestors were mostly in the parasympathetic. We're supposed to live in the parasympathetic, and when there is danger, then we go into the sympathetic, into that fight or flight, that survival, that instinctual, where that survival instinct turns on. So what happens to a race when they are constantly in survival mode? Mm-hmm. Right? Which is like, if you know our history, it makes sense, right? There is no judgment. You can understand from a higher viewpoint, a higher consciousness around the sexual abuse and the sexual trauma that is happening, right, between us, right? When we take in full responsibility and turning the lens back on us, we can understand why this trauma is being cycled, while also acknowledging the origin of it, right? Taking full responsibility the way that we are cycling, and understanding the history to know where it started, and then taking that responsibility to shift it, doing the practices that are necessary to bring yourself into the parasympathetic, so you're giving your body the homeostasis that it needs for it to naturally heal.
Yeah. And I think it's important for us to recognize that idea of survival that we're talking about, like when we shift it into the lens of security, we can neutralize it so that we can see ourselves in the ability to thrive, right? And recognize, where are we right now in the cycle? Can we move out of survival mode and move into thriving? And can we know that our ability to thrive also allows us to be secure? Because we may have different beliefs around that. We are constantly being programmed with ideas and visuals of lack. Like you were talking about the art and how, like, when you think about the movies that are constantly showing us enslaved narratives, and yes, the slave narrative is very important because we have to recognize the experiences of our ancestors. However, it's very strategic that we don't see those same levels of depiction of African empires, or even during the enslavement period. You don't see stories of Nat Turner and the different rebellions that took place. You don't see those expressions because, again, it's intentionally to trigger a particular response for us. Whereas if we go beyond that expression, we can see, okay, what is it to shift out of survival mode into thriving? And thriving is still a grounded physical expression of the root energy center. So to me, I see that as shifting out of an evolutionary paradigm that is linear, that is part of our colonized mind, and moving into a revolutionary ideology around how things grow in spirals and how even time moves in spirals. We have a lot of programming through the new age right now that talks about timelines and time as a linear paradigm. Even time is not linear. Right. And that's something that's a deep orientation. That's part of why a lot of the medicine that sexual alchemy is built upon is around us reorienting our perception of time. Because when we think about time as a revolutionary, right, like what you see on your screen right now is the spiral of growth. It's called the golden mean sometimes. Sometimes it's called the fingerprint of God. Some people know it as the Fibonacci spiral. Fibonacci is a European. So I like to root us in an African orientation of it, because this is the element of Tehuti. Remember, we talked about Tehuti or Tehuti, and we talked about that energy being the one that governs the throat energy center. We talked about how that is the expression of intellect, of expression of the head, really. Right? And it's essential to think about this as a mathematical equation, because as you can see, there's this multiplication, right, of what creates growth in our planet, in the creation process, and beyond our planet. If you really zoom out, even to the furthest levels of looking at the universe, you still see this spiral, right? When you look at the Milky Way, for example, our galaxy, there's a spiral, right? When you look at the waves, when you look at the way that things grow in nature, it's a spiral. And I think that that's key, because you mentioned revolution a lot, sis. And I think that it's so important for us to know that revolution, in its etymology, it has a solar element. That R in the beginning is the sun. Remember, we talked about Ra? The Greek interpretation of Ra is Re. And remember that Latin, English is based on Latin, and Latin comes from the Romans, right? So when we're talking about the Greco-Roman, right, the Greek and the Roman paradigm that we were colonized into, right, because that's the foundation and the classical European civilization, right? So when we're coming into Kemetic science, we're talking about classical African civilization that predated that. So there's an intentionality around removing the solar element, because when you think about European culture, the solar element in terms of the culture, right? When we talk about the two cradle theory, going back to Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, we're talking about two different cultures. One that developed with a lack of sun, right? Because of where on the planet it was. That's why you had so much ice. Right? That's why you had a reality that cultivated a different personality. So when we're talking about our collective body, like when we're talking about the African spirit and we're talking about specifically that piece, it's very important, because yes, there's one organism if we look at the planet, but there are different expressions of it. It's just like our body is one thing, but it does organize into organs. Literally, you have the word organ in organize. So there's nothing wrong with us looking at this particular body of humanity that is Africa, right? Or African people, because there's a unique expression that needs to be honored there, and a unique story. And it's very different, the type of healing that needs to be done to those who were enslaved versus those who did the enslaving. But both do need healing. So as we speak on this, I do think it's important to recognize that that spiral of creation, instead of looking at a linear creation where, it thwarts our perception of our lived physical experience. So I want to ground it in a way for you to understand. If you think about everything in an evolutionary context, you think things are always supposed to get better. And that's just not the truth. The reality is we revolve around the sun. Even when we come back around to the same spot, we're never really in the same spot, because it's even our sun is spiraling in the galaxy, right? And our galaxy is spiraling in the universe, and so on and so forth. So there is, like, we do come back around, right? And that comes back to principles like Ma'at, when we talked about the karmic aspect of Ma'at. What goes around comes around. That's what we mean by that. So things go through a process. So that shifts your orientation to your physical reality. If you think that everything's always supposed to get progressively better, and then you're experiencing a low moment, you can be defeated in that. But if you recognize that things spiral, then you know when things come down, they're going to go back around. So as a collective body, when we recognize and we face the trauma that we went through, we can also face that in knowing things are going to come back around, that this is just part of a developmental process. We don't just stay down, right? Like, we have to come back around. And what's required of that is a spirit, an essence of revival, of revolution, right? Of coming back around. We had a beautiful golden age. A lot of the science that we've shared throughout this series came from that golden age of Africa. And now, as we've come down into the pits of this inverted cycle, we have to recognize that things are going to rise back up. But as it goes up, it's an uphill battle, right? So there is still going to be that oppositional energy that has to create strength. We talked about that through Set being the principle of gravity. It pushes you down. But just like when you're lifting weights, you need the gravity to push you down. That's what's allowing you to tear those muscles and create the strength that you need. So it's purposeful. And I do think that this is one of the fundamental perceptions that we have to shift, from going to a linear evolutionary paradigm to a revolutionary cyclical paradigm of how we perceive development on the planet. And that brings me back to the cycles of life, because we die. And that's what, when we talk about survival and orienting ourselves or stabilizing our foundation in the physical world, if you are afraid of death, the way that you survive is going to be brutal. Right? Like, that's where we have that barbarism we're talking about, where these expressions of like, I'm gonna survive by any means necessary because I'm afraid of my death. That's very different from the behavior to preserve yourself if you just don't have that fear of death. What you see on your screen is a beautiful tomb, right? Because when we think about the ancestors that created a lot of the wisdom that we share, that's the foundation of all of the major Western religions. When we think about all of that knowledge and that intellect that went into cultivating it, we're talking about a people who deeply studied death. Because how much we revered life, we also recognize that death is equally significant. So all the decadence and the care that was put into preparing the tomb and preparing the body and the spirit and the soul for death, and recognizing the transition of that, all of the sacred texts that I've mentioned throughout our series, when I talked about the Pertemru, the book of coming forth from night into day, I talked about the pyramid text, which is a funerary text. We went over the judgment scene, the transition of the death through the duat, right? The book of doors, the book of gates. Those are all funerary texts, because this is wisdom that came from what? The acknowledgement of the wholeness, that there is no life without death. So recognize that in our physical reality, how we express our desire to survive is critical for us to think about what our perception of death is. And culturally, we're being oriented by a culture that embraces death in one extent, where it's cultivating a lot of things that create death. Right? When we think about guns, when we think about murder, when we think about even like a lot of the movies around like horror films and different things like that, there's a upliftment of death. But when you think about it in its foundational sense, like, people can be entertained by death and create and perpetuate death, but have a complete ignorance around the sacredness of death, or even being prepared for their own death. Most people are afraid to face their death, right? When it comes down to it, and people are in a space of disease or illness, or have aged, they're elderly. The tendency in this culture is to not face that, right? And a lot of that is through the program that we talked about, right? There's a fear of like, you know, like burning in hell, or like these perceptions of like, okay, what's going to come after death? There's ideas that we have around what we think that is. So when we're talking about survival, that's critical, because survival is about avoiding death. Yeah. So it brings us into like what we were speaking about from the beginning, which is, what is this alchemical process to begin with? When we talk about life, we're talking about health, right? We're talking about vitality, and recognizing that we can honor and look at death and be clear about the aspects of us that are here physically to survive, to thrive, to be secure and stabilized. And what that looks like is health, right? It is vitality. The best way to secure yourself, right? The best way to create a stabilizing in your body is through vitality and through having the frequency of health in your body. If you're in a state of disease, that is a state of decay, right? So that's a state of moving towards death versus moving towards life. So we had talked about before the Kundalini, and that being akin to Wajet in the ancient Kemetic tradition. And we looked at the symbol that's used in the modern medical industry, right? We have the Caduceus, and we talked about the Heru Behutet, right? The symbol of protection that's above every single temple doorway. And the two serpent energies that are shown spiraling through the different energy centers of the body. So all of that is to say, like, sometimes these symbols are coded in the world and we might not be conscious of it, but it's still speaking to our health. And when we're talking about the root energy center, we're talking about the body, right? It's not just about making sure the body survives. And I'm trying to shift us into thinking like we stabilize our foundation by moving out of survival and into thriving, which means we're looking at our vitality, we're looking at our health, we're looking at the state of our body. And we've been talking about this power. We've been talking about all the different ways that our power could get blocked throughout all the various spheres of our bodies. And then we just connected it today back to where we started, which is our collective body. Right. And the things that are affecting our collective body also affect us, because the way that the world, right, our social environment predicates our individual experience in our individual bodies. Right. If there are, like, for example, Donald Trump is going to become president and be inaugurated. And that is a physical expression of the lived world if you live in the divided states or beyond that, because it's such a prominent force on the planet that dictates so much of people's actual physical reality. That is something that is part of the collective that directly affects the physical body. A lot of people have gone into fight or flight. A lot of people have contracted a lot because of fear, because they think that this is going to affect their ability to exist in their own unique individual life. So it is important to recognize like both of those things. Like, it's not just you can't live in a delusional state when you're talking about the root energy, right? It's important for us to come into balance by recognizing, yes, the external environment does affect me, and my sense of security begins inside of me. To me, that's what Wajet represents. The Kundalini or Wajet is about our intuition. So if you're stabilized within your own intuition, your intuition can guide you to safety, right? You can sense and know, like, I need to get out of here. There's nothing that can logically, linearly make sense about me just getting a gut instinct and my intuition telling me, hey, get out the house and leave. And then something can happen the moment I step out of that house. No way to make logical sense of that, but that's a sense of security that we cultivate from within ourselves by tuning into that life force within us and how it sits in the root of our energy center. So I was going to ask you, sis, if you could talk a little bit about like the Kundalini and how we go from a state of the stagnated expression of it and just we all have the energy regardless, right? Whether we're conscious of it or not. But how do we come into a state of actually activating and stimulating that sense?
Yeah. While you were sharing, I was thinking, like, this is, we talked about so much today, right? With this root chakra, the foundation. And essentially at the root of sexual alchemy, what we are desiring and what our intention is to literally support you in flowing up, right? And why do we want you to flow up? So Kundalini is a coiled serpent at the base of your spine. And what the serpent entails is potentiality. So it's like the potential that you have at the base of your spine that if you move up can then create and manifest physically out in the world. So the reason why, we're the root chakra, yes, it's important, all the ways that we have to go deep. And the intention is to stabilize this foundation so then we can actually become the creators of our lives that we are, right? So we have this potentiality at the base of our spine to create our reality, to actualize the desires that we have in our heart that has been intentionally put there by the creator. But if we come into this physical world, into this physical reality, in these bodies, in these vessels that are connected physically to whoever the lineage is that the soul comes into, if we stay only in that level of consciousness of just, I'm the personality, I'm Leyanne, I'm a Criolla, I'm 32 years old, if I stay at that, if I stay at just that, in the trauma of that, right? All those that are connected to me, and what does it mean to be a Criolla? Like all the things that my identity are attached to, like that I'm attached to at the root. If I stay there, then I'm not able to activate this potential that I have as a piece of God, right? Like this Kundalini, it's a potentiality because it's the piece that the creator put in of its. Oh my God, I wish I had this beautiful story. There's this beautiful story that the Hopi people share. This indigenous tribe here in the Americas that describes it so well. It's like it's this piece of God that it put inside of you so you don't forget who you are. And in this process of sexual alchemy, what we're doing is we're awakening it. Right. So we're going to the places where it's contracting the root, right? We're going to the places where there going to the root, to the chakra, we're going to the root, that's why we're going to the sexual, we're going to the sexual energy, y'all. We could be going to so many other places. We could be calling this ancestral healing. We could be calling this awakening your third eye. We could be talking about so many other things, but we're saying no, we're going right to your potentiality. We want to go right, and and we're talking about the resurrection, right, of African people. We're telling you we want to go right to the place of you that is God, right to the place of you that is source, that is connected to what created all of this, that is your divinity, that is your birthright, that is right inside of you. One of the things that the yogi also found out through this deep inquiry, and they shared through all the Vedic teachings, is that they found that liberation is actually through the body. that for us to ascend into the higher realms, because they were looking for connection to God. They wanted to understand deeper, like, what is this? Why are we here? So oftentimes, just like the same, sis talking about it being cyclical, right? We're still in the same place, right? Earlier, I talked about like us wanting to like move up to the third chakra because we just want to connect to God. We want to go to all these things. We want to be disconnected to the body, which is the same thing the yogis were also at. It was the same place that they were in when they were investigating into our higher states. And what they came back to was, oh, for us to get there, we got to go in the body. We got to connect back to the body. We have to move the spinal fluid. We have to do this work in the body to liberate the body so we can then be able to actualize this energy, for the energy to move, because the kundalini is coiled at the base of the spine, right? And what causes it to be there is a protection, right? Because if the kundalini just wakes up and moves inside of your body, they say when the kundalini awakens, it's like sitting on an atomic bomb. It's an intense experience. It's not like you know, it's nothing small. I'm talking about your God nature waking up inside of your body. So the layers of protection, right? The trauma, the contraction also has a purpose. We're not saying we want you to just get rid of all your trauma so this thing can just move. No, we're saying we're going to intentionally support you through this process, what your body already wants to do when you're ready. If you're ready to embody your power, which if you're coming to this retreat, we know you have already done the work. We know that you already at a certain state of consciousness to even be attracted and to even be able to come into our field, into this live, to even get on the website, to be able to move, right? You're not in the root chakra. You're not the people that are in the root chakra that we're talking about. They'll probably live and die there, which is no shame to that. That is part of why spirits come here. It doesn't make moving up the chakra doesn't make you better than any other human being living on here. Right? Because they're at their essence, they're liberated and free beings and sovereign beings, but they chose to come into this physical reality so they can experience life here. So staying in the root chakra, there is no shame to that. Now, however, the warriors, the ones that are coming to impact and actually shift this reality, we come intentionally to destroy what needs to be destroyed, right? For death to happen, to whatever death needs to happen, and for more life to come. We're conscious of the transformation journey, and we come for that. We want to exercise our full potential. We want to be in our God nature of creating. Like God put that in us because we are allowed to. God enjoys when we allow that to happen. So the Kundalini is at the base of the spine, and it's our full potential. And one of the points that I wanted to make as we continue, as we're descending now, bringing ourselves to a close on this, is the barriers that we're going to be working through in the sexual alchemy to allow the energy to move, right? The barriers is the traumas, the constricting, and the hooks that can only be there through our traumas, right? They hook us, they fear us through the trauma. There's specific parts in the body which called gratis, where there's these and it's 3 parts in the body where there's thick layers of contraction, and they're there specifically for a reason. They have a service to do, because our bodies need to be in a place of equilibrium for that energy to flow, for us to manifest. If not, there are people that experience spontaneous, is what they call it, Kundalini rising, which I'm sure they agreed to before their spirit came here. But there are people that experience spontaneous, where it just happens to them, and the thing just rises. People that experience that describe it to be very painful, and they describe it to be very disorienting, and they describe it to, and they have a really hard time, getting it together. Yeah.
So give thanks, sis. I appreciate all the different expressions that came through, lifting us out of the root, right? And recognizing the root is essential. So this is why what's on the screen right now is showing you the circulation of energy. You always have to come back to the root, right? And the root, so that's why it's showing you the circulatory system is showing you the energy flowing down from the top down and from the bottom up. So this is what the art of sexual alchemy and the practices that we're going to be doing together are. Like when we do the meditations that we're going to be doing together, showing you exactly how to work that cerebral spinal fluid up your jed, right, up your spine, and move and circulate that energy. All of those practices are essential. We're going to do a practice to close for sure. But I wanted to also speak on, again, we did speak on this principle, but this is the principle of the root. It is the foundation, because Ptah is the force of the foundation. It's the force of creation of the physical reality, right? It is the mound of creation. So sometimes Ptah is depicted as the mound. You can actually see in the image on the left, some of the Medunetter on the wall, right? The hieroglyphs on the wall, you actually see the mound, right? Because that is what Ptah represents. There's also a significant aspect of Ptah that I want to speak on about the root that's important when we think about this force of nature that is indwelling and embodied through our root. It is the physical world, right? So we talked about the physical body being an expression of the physical world and the mound of creation, right? When we think of Ptah and they say the mound of creation, we're talking about that first aspect, right? From the first volcanic eruptions that created the terrain of the earth that we know, not the water, but coming out of that primordial water, Ptah is the primordial mound. When we're talking about primordial energy, we're talking about what exists before existence, which is why we've been talking about reclaiming our identity when it comes to our divinity, because the divine has a conscious expression and an unconscious expression. We have the God and the goddess, right? The God is the conscious expression. The goddess is the unconscious expression. It's the potential, right? It's the chaos, it's the darkness. And then the light is the expression of the consciousness of what we see that's created. But it's not, we know that it's more than what meets the eye in terms of what's created and what's existing and circulating around us, right? We don't question if this Wi-Fi is working because we can't see it, because we understand that there's things, there's frequencies that we can't see. When we talked about the colors and the light spectrum, and we talked about what we can see and the certain waves and frequencies that we cannot see because of the frequency in which they're vibrating. So I want to come back to that, because when we're talking about Ptah, we're talking about the energy paradigm, right? Which the Jed represents. He has a Jed in his hand, which is that backbone, right? As we've been talking about the spine. And he also has, there's an Ankh in there that you can kind of see the hoop at the top of the Jed. And there's a Wa scepter, which is the scepter that represents Set, which is dominion of your lower nature, right? So that animal nature and having dominion over your ego is what is represented through Ptah. Now, Ptah is usually seen wrapped up. You don't see him express like some of the masculine, if you're looking at sacred masculine forces or principles in the Kemetic sciences, you'll see them sometimes with erections or different things to express that masculine expression. But Ptah was actually considered to be an androgynous principle because it was expressing something that was not neither masculine or feminine. It was speaking to the wholeness of it. And it's similar to when we see the depictions of Asar. So if you remember and reflect back on the previous cycles that we did when we were talking about in the higher energies, we were talking about Asar. And we said how Asar had to die and go through the death. We express that as the energy when it dies and it's unconscious, or the vision when it's unconscious. And then after it goes through that death process and that resurrection, it then reigns over the underworld, right? So we talked about how Asar is the lord of the underworld. And when that happens and the pieces of Asar's body are put together, the remembrance, right? Remembering the pieces together, he's then bandaged and depicted like Ptah as an androgynous energy. But it still has a masculine sense. So it's the way that we look at the earth, for example. I think it's important to recognize in Kemetic science, the earth is depicted as a masculine energy. So I will just put that as something on the screen that I want to show. We talked about this before, but Nut and Geb, when we're looking at it through Kemetic science, the earth is masculine and the heavens are feminine. So you see Nut, the night, which literally comes where the word night comes from, Nut. You're seeing that as a feminine expression. And we talked about how she swallows Ra, she swallows the sun and gives birth to him. Right? So this is all symbolic, but it's speaking to an inversion, right? Because through colonization, we've gotten an orientation, especially in the West, there's an orientation, right? And it's not right or wrong. It's just different expressions, right? So if we're talking about coming back around, that means we're coming back around to inverting it back the other way around. So where we've been taught through the Western religions that there's a Godhead, a masculine figure or Godhead in the heavens, and that the earth is feminine. Ancestrally, through Kemetic science, the earth is considered masculine and the heavens is considered feminine. And I wanted to express that because when we're talking about Ptah, that doesn't mean the earth doesn't have feminine aspects. That's why when we talk about the mound of creation or the primordial mound, we're talking about an androgynous energy, because we know that everything, including us, has both masculine and feminine, and that being the male and female, or the father and the mother that is within each of us. That's required for us to actually be created, right? We need the sperm to fertilize the egg. So as we had talked about, like that bandaged expression, I wanted to show this figure as well, because Ptah is the patron of all craftsmen. And we had talked about how the Oscar is literally an ode to Ptah. because it's expressing this aspect of creation or creating the physical world. Ptah is described as the potter who makes the physical form. So there's an aspect of the physical world that's expressed through this. And I wanted to just show Pangea, like what we call Pangea is Ptah. Like when we talk about that first mound of creation, where it's very interesting to think about the placement of Africa within that, that even when you had the separation and the land separates into different pieces, right? You could even look at that through the symbolism of Asar and the pieces separating. So I just wanted to express that as what Ptah really represents. Ptah is the principle of the grounded expression of creation and us honoring that. And like Sis says, there is an importance to the body. That's why sexual alchemy is about embodying your power. And us recognizing what embodiment means is not escaping the body. So it's very different from a lot of the spiritual interpretations that we've been given through the new age, that's trying to get people to escape through their energy centers or to do astral projection or do things that really remove you out of the body. And I'm not saying that you cannot do those things. I highly do not recommend those things if you are not fully rooted and know exactly what you're moving through, because the importance of the body. There's so much that can happen when we escape our body, because there's so much energy present that does recognize that, even if we don't, that recognizes the importance of being able to move matter and to be physical. It's a gift. It really is a gift. So balancing the root energy is also about balancing our ability to be here and responsible for our physical creative power. So I just wanted to express that, because there's so many people who are struggling with just staying alive, and the desire to stay alive. And I just want you to recognize those entities, those thought forms that may want to convince you that your life does not matter. They are lies, right? Because your physical body, your physical reality, and what you create does matter. And only you can express what it is that is in your heart and in your soul. And because sometimes we get boggled down by the density, that's why it's important for us to move through these energy centers. Because if you get stuck down here and you think this is all that matters, you start to operate through the value paradigms of the collective consciousness in the physical world. And as we said, that is governed by parasites, right? So doing things like a parasite cleanse, all of that, I highly recommend things of that nature when it comes to the physical body, right? Your purification of the body temple, cleansing the body, doing things like that to make sure that you have sovereignty in your physical body and your body is in the healthiest state, because that's what allows those types of energies, entities, and thought forms to attach themselves to you. So we've talked about it through every dimension, that there are entities and energies that can attach themselves to your trauma, but specifically through the body, that is one of the primary ways that energy tries to manifest. That could be even through rituals. Like I do think that it's very important for people to recognize, yes, ritual is a part of our birthright. It's one of the primary human technologies. It's also a way that you can externalize your power as well. So it's important for you to recognize the importance of protecting your body, protecting your energy space whenever you're opening up any ritual space. Or you enter into someone else's ritual space. Sometimes you go into other rituals that you're not even aware of, right? Watching the Super Bowl, right? That's a ritual, whether you are conscious of it or not, right? So it's important to recognize the power of your energy, your attention, and your presence, right? Where you physically enter with your body. So for me, I feel very complete with that as an expression of Ptah in this particular energy center. And as we've said with all the energy centers, it's just important to have them in balance, to be in truth about where you are as you're evaluating where are you in your root energy center. This is the space where we're dealing with our ability to provide for ourselves and our families, our shelter, our security. Do we have a place to live? Are we safe? So being clear about that and being clear about adjustments that need to be made in order to create that stability. And I think it's important to do that from inside out, right? So once you're stabilized inside, then you can create that externally. But focusing so much on the exterior sometimes can distract us from the power that we have within us. So we start to think that our security is dependent upon material things. Remember, how many people have lost everything in those fires that just took place? How many people have lost everything in the wars that have taken place? Right? But if you have stability from within yourself, you don't rely on the external things, your home, your money, right? All of these things to be what provides you security, because you recognize the security that you've cultivated within yourself. Okay.
Sister, can you do the sound bowl to close us off?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So we will.
Maybe just a couple rings, bells. Thank you for being with us, to connecting to your root chakra and allowing us to take you down into your root chakra for that release. That awareness, bringing the unconscious to the conscious. So thank you for rocking with us throughout this series. If you've been with us, it's been a true privilege and honor.
Yeah, and I do recommend that you go back. We went through a lot of information. If this is something that you found valuable, I do recommend that you go back and go over the different segments, because a lot of the things that were moved through, we touched back on it, but each particular aspect is so important. So we're just going to go ahead and just tune ourselves. So I want to just invite you to just come back into this moment. We're going to take this moment to just kind of integrate and pull in everything that we just learned and stabilize ourselves within ourselves, right? One of the things I think about a lot when I am with this frequency of the root is just remembering, like, that's the vibration that I get, is I'm safe, I'm sound, I am whole, I'm free, right? And recognizing that that is our birthright. That's our natural frequency when it comes to our root. So I think about that still tranquil fire of like the first people who were just living and existing on the earth, where there was no extra complication of our existence and what we need to live and survive, like the simplicity of that, and allow that to create some calm for us, because we live in a world where, yes, we have to deal with the reality of our circumstances and situations and all of the things that are happening in this world right now. And there's a way that we can face that through power, if we come back to this still center of that truth, that you are safe, you are sound, you are whole, and you are free. So just come into your breath, inhaling and exhaling through the nostrils. So we do want to thank you again for being here with us. And remember that you are invited to the Sexual Alchemy Retreat in Cabo Verde on the west coast of Africa, on the beautiful island of Sao Vicente from February 28th to March 7th. So that's approaching soon. If you feel the call to come and be here with us to go deep into this work and really just recognizing that warrior spirit within you, from a stabilized foundation, when we're talking about embodying revolution, we're talking about being present with our physical reality. The revolution begins in you. This is an investment for you to make on yourself. And this is the paradigm shift for us. What's best for you is best for everyone. What's best for you is best for everyone. When you are in a stabilized, whole, and healthy space within yourself, you're here to create whatever is in your heart, whatever is in our soul body that came through for your incarnation in this life cycle. You will be able to cultivate and curate and carry that through, fully supported, if you are whole, if you are present in yourself. And we want to support you in reclaiming your power, embodying your power, no matter what you've experienced, whether it's something you're carrying through the collective consciousness and field that has traumatized our sexual energy, our ancestral body, or a personal expression of sexual abuse or trauma that has imprinted itself on you. We've gone through it. We're here. We're with you. And we want to support you in that through a beautiful experience, through celebration, meditation, movement, all these different medicines, foods, the ocean, this beautiful experience that we've curated for you all. So you can visit sexualalchemy.com for more information. You can schedule a chemistry call with us, and you can apply for the Sexual Alchemy Retreat on February 28th. Okay. So I don't know if you want to say anything else as we close out, sis. I want to thank you for all of your medicine and your wisdom that you've shared with us today.
Yeah, the only thing I have to say is join us. Just get on the website and join us for this life-changing experience.
Ashe. So we are complete. Thank you to everyone who has been with us throughout this entire series. We appreciate you. We love you. We are sending you strength and love, and we hope that this has cultivated more resilience, resistance, rejuvenation for you in your body. Please move through these practices. Please move through seeing how you can embody these principles in your life and the choices that you make every single day, and what you radiate through your willpower, right? Through the way that you express this energy with your words, with your vision, right? All of these different things that we've shared with you. Please know that these are very, very, very sacred, powerful principles. And we trust that we've casted these beautiful pearls to those who deserve it.
Ashe.
Ashe. Wow.
Ashe.